I've always been a skeptic, one of those people who laugh at ghost stories and dismiss supernatural events as mere figments of overactive imaginations. My name is Alex Carter. I'm a journalist with a penchant for debunking myths and unraveling the truth behind so-called paranormal activities. Here are some stories as told by different people. The funeral train of Abraham Lincoln. It is said that Abraham Lincoln's funeral train pulled out of Washington, D.C. depot on its way to visit some thousands of grief-stricken citizens in a few hundred communities. It is also said that the ghost of this funeral train retraces its route every year, and if you are one of the lucky ones who happen to be walking along the railroad lines at that time, you may just spot a black steam engine with fire coming from its smokestack coming down the track. If you happen to peek through the window, you could catch a glimpse of President Lincoln's coffin as it is laid out among soldiers who keep a close watch over it. In a village called St. Louis, Saskatchewan, villagers say they see spooky lights along a certain stretch of the railroad track. These lights are reported to be either red or white, and the red light is reported to look like a light that used to flash from behind a caboose. There are two theories about these lights. One is that it may be the ghost of a conductor who had died in an accident along the tracks, and the other is that it could be from a ghost train that was used in a deadly train robbery. If you are out in that area, you could make the ghost train part of your travels. The next story that takes place at a section of railroad in Duffy's Cut, near Malvern, Pennsylvania. Over the years, believers have claimed to have seen some strange sort of orbs floating around a trench close to the railroad tracks. Some reports say it is the ghosts of Irish railroad workers. They delved into the stories of the areas where the ghosts or orbs were seen and found remains from what looked like a mass grave. Apparently, the remains weren't from people dying from a disease, it was from gunshots. All these people were shot and dumped into a mass grave. The next story is my own experience. It's as true and real as any of the stories before. The Maplewood line in New Jersey had been abandoned for decades, its rusty tracks a relic of a bygone era. Stories of a phantom train that roamed those tracks had been circulating for years, but no one had ever provided concrete evidence. My colleague and I arrived at the old Maplewood station just before midnight. The station was a decrepit shell of its former self, with broken windows and graffiti-covered walls. The deafening silence was punctuated only by the distant hoot of an owl. As the clock struck midnight, a low rumble resonated through the ground. To my astonishment, an old steam locomotive emerged from the fog, its headlight piercing the darkness. The train looked as if it was from another era. It came to a halt in front of us. The conductor, a tall, gaunt figure in a vintage uniform, silently motioned for us to board. The interior of the train was immaculate, as if it had been frozen in time. Velvet seats, polished brass fixtures, and ornate woodwork. We settled into a compartment, the door sliding shut with a soft click, and the train lurched forward. Minutes turned into hours as the train chugged along the tracks. Outside, it was total darkness over the landscape. The silence was broken only by the rhythmic clatter of wheels on rails. Suddenly, a cold breeze swept through the compartment. The temperature plummeted and our breath fogged in the air. I fumbled for my flashlight and scanned the room. That's when we saw them, shadowy figures seated in the opposite seats. Their faces were obscured, but their presence was undeniable. The figures remained motionless. Their eyes, if they had any, were completely fixated on us. My colleague clutched my arm and whispered, "Alex, what are they?" "I don't know," I replied, "but we need to find out." We got up from our seats and made our way to the front of the train where the conductor's quarters were located. The passageway was narrow and dimly lit. The conductor, now unmistakably ghostly, stood before us. His eyes glowed with an unnatural light, and his skeletal hands clutched a tattered timetable. He spoke in a voice that echoed through the corridors of time. "Welcome to the Midnight Express. You are now passengers on a journey between the realms of the living and the dead." My heart raced as I demanded, "What do you mean between realms?" The conductor's hollow eyes seemed to pierce my soul. To understand the truth, you must confront your fears. This train is a vessel for lost souls seeking closure. Each passenger has a story, and so do you. Before I could respond, the conductor vanished, leaving us in total shock. Sarah and I exchanged horrified glances. I wasn't keen on going back to my compartment with the ghostly figure staring at us, so we explored the train, encountering more eerie passengers along the way. One passenger, a young woman named Emily, shared her heartbreaking story of a love lost to a train accident. Her spirit had been bound to the Midnight Express, searching for her beloved. Another, a stern businessman named Mr. Thompson, recounted his obsession with wealth, leading to his untimely demise on the tracks. As we listened, a strange sense of empathy grew within us. These spirits were trapped between worlds, their pain and longing very real. The train was not just a haunted vessel, it was a bridge between life and death, a purgatory for souls seeking redemption. The train's journey seemed endless, but time held no meaning in this ghostly realm. The conductor reappeared, guiding us to the final compartment. "To leave this train, you must face your own past," he said. Memories I had long buried resurfaced, my guilt over my brother's death, my regrets, and my unresolved fears. The train forced me to confront the shadows within myself. My colleague had to face her own demons. As we confronted our pasts, the train began to change. The oppressive darkness lifted, replaced by a soft, beautiful glow. The ghostly passengers faded. The Midnight Express slowed to a halt, the whistle echoing through the night. The conductor, now more human than ghost, smiled faintly. "I believe this is your stop." I nodded, and we stepped off the train back onto the old Maplewood station platform. Years later, the story of the Midnight Express became a legend in its own right. People from all walks of life came to the Maplewood line, seeking solace and closure. The ghost train's mystery continues to this day. And as for me, Alex Carter, I became a believer.